Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
3 minutes after 11 is the time. Jeremy Hunt, I guess, a politician who no one is ever going to describe as slick and fluid. He last night begged patients to stay away from crisis-hit hospitals. He suggested that the A&E crisis that is now in place in many NHS trusts is our fault. It is our fault for turning up at A&E unnecessarily. He also suggested that the 4-hour treatment target could be on the way out of the windows. I don't know quite how to approach this story. I'd like to do it in a way, and this is probably going to fall at the first hurdle, but I'd like to do it in a way that was a little less political than usual and a little more operational. We're very blessed on this programme to routinely take calls from people who are living the story that we're discussing, as opposed to merely commentating upon it or describing it, which is my job. We generally, in fact, a lovely description, a very kind piece about me in the Observer at the weekend. It just said that it's working now, or at least I believe it is. When we're talking about life support, we take calls from the parents of people in comas, and when we were talking about fidelity, we took a call from that incredible woman who'd had a baby by a man who turned out to have been an undercover policeman who completely disappeared out of her life while her son was still young. These are sort of extreme examples, but at the more ordinary level, it means that when we talk about prison, we get calls from prison officers and indeed on some occasions prisoners. When we talk about police tell us what's going on, and A&E and NHS is actually something everybody's got a stake in. We've all got a funny story about going to A&E and witnessing someone who really had no business being there. I got a friend who tells a tale. In fact, I'm a little embarrassed to point out to him that I've now heard the story about 100 times, but given that I've shared my anecdotes with you on some occasions about 1 million times, it'd be a bit pot kettle. But he thinks it's hilarious that when he took his little boy to A&E on a Saturday night, which is obviously not a time you'd go unless you really had to, there was a fella who had come along on a Saturday night to accident and emergency because he hadn't made a bowel movement for a week. He thought this was of epic importance. Doctors and nurses incredibly impatient, and quite rightly so, sending him home with a tin of prunes. So all of us have probably at some point in our lives been a little bit guilty of turning up at A&E with neither an accident nor an emergency. But when you hear some of those recordings of people ringing 999, you realise that our understanding of what an emergency is very different from what other people's might be. I've lost the remote control, for example, is a reason that has been given in the past for dialing 999, or you know, I can't get my chips from the chip shop because I've hurt my leg. Can you send an ambulance to pick them up for me? You remember the sort of comedy calls that we've had. Because it is so political, though, it's often hard to work out where responsibility lies. And I've already fallen into this trap myself by pointing out that we haven't had a crisis like this in the NHS since the mid-90s, which is a period during which we had a Conservative government. By 2010, even in the immediate aftermath of the financial crisis, and I'm pretty sure I've got this right, but again, if I'm misremembering, then feel free to correct me. I'm pretty sure that patient satisfaction surveys, patient approval ratings were the highest they had ever been in 2010 when Gordon Brown got handed his sandwiches wrapped in a roadmap. Labour often trumpets itself as a great protector of the NHS and often claims when electioneering that the Conservatives pose a grave threat to it. I am persuaded by some of the arguments about a desire in some corners of the Conservative Party to see more privatisation in the NHS. I'm persuaded of that because I've read the articles they've written saying so, often before they achieve high office. It's something that is best left unsaid once you're in a position to actually deliver it. But when you're working your way up the greasy pole, quite a lot of these characters have written articles and chapters for books describing the NHS in terms that make it clear they see it as a dormant cash cow just waiting to be turned into a money machine for the usual suspects in investment. But when the Daily Mail is running an article written by a doctor in which he describes being scared of taking a family member into hospital without mentioning the word immigration, and I've just scanned through the article very quickly, if the Daily Mail are doing it without mentioning the word immigration, then I think the rest of us have to sit up and take notice. He concludes, when doctors and nurses are scared that their family members might become sick and need to come into hospital, it is undeniable that there is a monumental crisis. A monumental crisis. So let's start with those doctors and nurses. I was about to get a bit dewy-eyed then, metaphorically speaking. I'm literally quite dewy-eyed at the moment, but I saw a doctor about that yesterday. I love the NHS. I love it, even though I'm well aware of its flaws and its failings. Whenever I take a call when somebody says to me, socialism doesn't work, I mean, in many ways they're right. Of course it doesn't work as an economic system, but if you want, give me an example of something socialist that works. The British National Health Service is a thing of almost incomparable beauty. I don't believe that it would exist if it hadn't been for the Second World War. I don't think that an Irene Bevan and his cohorts would ever have got it past the conservative establishment if it wasn't for the fact that people were coming home from the war with limbs missing and their nerves shot to pieces, and a debt of gratitude owed by a nation to a returning army that could only really be realised by bringing proper health care at the time the preserve of the rich and the lucky to the masses. That is, I know it's a very dirty word and I'm not going to labour the point, but that is socialism in absolute action, where a health service is free at the point of care to absolutely everybody in a society, in a nation. And it is a thing of, I genuinely mean this, it's a thing of such incomparable beauty that we are in grave danger of waving goodbye to it because we've taken it for granted for so long. Because when crises like this happen, they don't usually get fixed. And this might be pertinent to the conversation we have in the next hour about Southern Rail and rail strikes. When things like this happen, they don't usually get fixed by politicians admitting that they've made terrible mistakes and spending a serious amount of money to take us back to where we were before all the mistakes happened. That's why I keep hitting you over the head with the 2010 statistic. 2010 patient approval ratings in the National Health Service were the highest they have ever been. Okay? So, if you're a doctor or a nurse or a healthcare professional, could you just respond immediately to the suggestion by the doctor writing in a newspaper today that you are scared that your family members might become sick and need to come into hospital? Are things that bad in the place where you work? I can offer you anonymity. You don't have to use your real name. You're welcome to be as upfront, as honest as you please, but equally I'm happy to offer you some camouflage. That's where I want to start this, okay? I can't do it if you don't ring me. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. Are you genuinely scared that a family member might become sick because the hospital in which you work is in such dire straits? Okay? And then I'm going to run a very real risk of making the kind of radio that I ordinarily warn against. One of those questions that guarantees a flurry of phone calls but doesn't necessarily guarantee that any of them will be interesting. It's almost up there with, is there anybody old out there feeling poorly? Because what I want to know is about this curious mental process we go through when we decide to go to A&E with something that the experts tell us we shouldn't have done. And I'll use myself as a guinea pig on this. I could conceivably have turned up at accident and emergency yesterday, and all I've got is a poorly eye. Pharmacist, brilliant. Big fan of pharmacists, actually. I'd be keen to see them do more. It's a shame this government seems poised to shut a lot of pharmacies. Over-the-counter medication, not working for me. Not working. And therefore, you sort of wonder, what do I do next? Try to get a GP appointment, and if I was registered at the health centre up the road as opposed to the one I go to, it would have been a 3-week wait unless I could get an emergency appointment, which involves getting on the blower at 8 o'clock in the morning, which means I've already had to take the day off work, because if I'm on the phone at 8 o'clock in the morning, there's no way I can be here at 10 o'clock in case they say, yes, we have got an appointment. My eye is itching like Billy O. It's seeping. I won't go on about this. But the point is, I wanted some medical attention, and the GP surgery couldn't really give it to me. Then they did. I left my phone number. They were brilliant. They rang me. They had a little gap. Boom. I was lucky, and I had the day off yesterday, so I could actually just turn up at the drop of a hat. That's not true for any other day of the year. So I would have gone. All right, let's do it that way round. If I can't see the GP for 3 weeks, And getting an emergency appointment is a little bit like a round in the Krypton factor. We need to find a way to explain why, even though you're in agony or in grave discomfort, you shouldn't go to A&E. So there's two ways into this. The patients, which is kind of almost all of us, 0345 6060 973, and the professionals, which is very simply a question that I ask you as a friend, actually. How bad is it? Straight up, how bad is it? Doctors, nurses, how bad is it? Just tell us, all right? Don't worry about frightening us. I'll deal with that. I always remember. I'll come to the calls after the travel news because I want to tell you this. It's important. There's a couple of phone lines free, so hit the numbers now. You will get through. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. So talk about the criteria for going to A&E, but also if you're a doctor or a nurse or a midwife or a professional, just honestly, hand on heart, how bad is it compared to everything you've seen in the course of your career? But here's my problem professionally, all right? And you may have heard me tell you this before, but I want to get it out there for the very simple reason that I haven't fully or properly addressed it in the past, and I want your help in addressing it today. Whenever I have conducted a conversation about perceived failings in the National Health Service, I always remember an email I took off an old lady who was due to go into hospital and was already scared, and emailed me to tell me that she was even more scared now. And I embarked upon quite a lengthy correspondence with her, and I mean, she told me, and I like to think she was telling the truth, that by the end of the correspondence, we'd got her back in a place where she was definitely going to go to the appointment. But that is the point of living in a society. You have to remember that the words that come out of your mouth resonate in corners of the country that you'll never even visit. How do we conduct this conversation without making people who are already vulnerable feel scared? Because I, as a journalist, am not in the business of frightening you or making you angry about things you shouldn't be frightened of or be angry about. I'm in the business of making you aware of things you should be aware of. And if that involves fear and anger, that is kind of the price we have to pay for knowledge. So I've got a horrible feeling that we're going to hear some pretty grim tales, but we're going to hear them devoid of politics, all right? That's the point. Doctors, nurses, call me now, 0345 6060 973. The rest of us, we're going to look at it from this simple angle of, like with my eye yesterday, which Joe in Suffolk just pointed out could have been a detached retina for all I knew. What do you do? What should you do? If you're in real discomfort or pain, you kind of know it's not an emergency and you're clear that it's not an accident, but what are you going to do? Actually, lots of you are telling me I wouldn't have been doing anything wrong if I had gone. A neglected eye infection can kill if it leads into your brain from behind the eye. Well, thanks a flipping bunch for that, Sandy. Let's go to the travel news while I compose myself. Where do we turn to for actual truth? Everybody has an axe to grind. Everybody, when they're talking about the NHS, has an agenda. Even some of the professional representatives of the professional bodies. Well, turn to me. Turn to LBC. Because we can talk directly to the people at the coalface about the current crisis. Red Cross have described it as a humanitarian crisis, but many politicians have queued up to claim that that is a massive exaggeration. It certainly got the attention that the British Red Cross wanted, and you can argue that it wanted attention for its own, quotes, agenda or for its own actual cause, a pretty good cause. I don't think we've yet reached a point, have we, where the Red Cross is on the list of enemies of the people. It could happen, probably will, the way things are going in Britain at the moment. But right now, we generally agree the Red Cross is a good thing, right? They say humanitarian crisis. Politicians say rubbish. Jeremy Hunt says it's all your fault for going to A&E when you should just have seen your GP. You say, well, I can't see my GP for 3 weeks. I say, so what the hell are you supposed to do in the interim? But if you're in the business, if you're in the NHS, doctor, nurse, any other healthcare professional, just give us a heads up, all right? Joe's in London. What would you like to say, Joe?
Hi, I'm a midwife. Well, currently not a midwife because I had to leave the profession due to the fact that I couldn't give good care that I came in to do. I've now gone into community nursing and it's a little bit easier. It's still very stretched, but I often go back in and do a bank shift at my old hospital just to keep my hand in because I loved my job.
As a midwife?
As a midwife.
So by bank shift, you mean, just to translate into civilian language, a bank shift is a bit like being a kind of supply teacher, but in the midwife world.
You go and do one shift for a day, just so that I can still do what I love doing.
Yes.
And I went in to do that shift on the postnatal ward about a few weeks back. And I wanted to walk out halfway through the day. I wanted to cry. There was no way I could stretch myself into so many different places to give the care I was supposed to give to 7 women, 7 babies, drugs around, looking after them. And I just thought that is why I left. And it's a shame because every woman I went into said how happy and how lovely the care was. But inside, there was no way I could have done another 2 shifts that week. And your question was about, would you take your family?
Yeah.
Over my dead body, would I take my daughter, who's now 21, to deliver in a hospital without me being present 24 hours of that time?
Why?
And that's not because it's not good. That's because the staff are under so much pressure that they cannot give the care that they need to give.
What's changed since you started? Well, where would you apportion responsibility for this decline?
Staff are reduced massively, and they're reduced massively down to the numbers the hospital need to have. But then you've got to take into account sickness and holidays because everyone's so stretched. They're all off sick, they're all on holiday, so the staff's reduced. So even if they say they've got the staff level, on paper they have.
But if they have 4 people taking a day off at the same time for whatever reason, and it all grinds to a shuddering halt.
You've got 3 midwives looking after a ward of, 30 women and their babies. It's the highest complaint rate is postnatal care.
Can you plot it for me? From when did you qualify, if you don't mind me asking?
2005.
Okay, so a decade really that you were there.
I was an accountant before this. I went into midwifery because I had 2 children. I wanted to do what people had done for me. One really bad, one really good. So I wanted to give a little bit back, and I loved every single minute. But I had to give it up because my family suffered, because my health declined, because I couldn't continue the job.
When did you start declining? So you started in 2005. Things were pretty good for a while. At what point did the problems appear on the horizon? Because presumably, like the rest of us, initially you'd think, oh, well, I'll sit this out, things will get better, the tide will come back in again. So at what point did you start thinking, oh, I hope this doesn't last much longer?
The more qualified you became, the more pressure got put on you, because then you would be having to run wards and do other stuff. And then you've got going out into the community, delivering home births on your own because there's no one to back you up.
But would there have been someone to back you up, or whoever was doing that in 2005? Would they have had someone to back them up? I'm trying to map the change, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, see, I couldn't tell you about that as far as the homework bias, because I was new, so I never did them at that point. But I just think from when I was qualified to as it got worse and worse, I realised that they was now starting to bring in more kind of admin staff and healthcare assistants rather than professional staff.
Because it's cheaper.
And then they're trying to run ragged because there's only one of them for a whole ward.
Yeah.
I think what I'm trying to say is, it doesn't matter what they're doing, or they can say we're doing this, we're doing that. Every single staff member cannot physically carry out the role to the top of our quality we're supposed to be given.
Because you're stretched, you're pushed. It'd be like putting someone on the radio for 11 hours and expecting them to sparkle in the same way that they do when they're on for 3.
Yeah, and now I can't do that job. And every day I'm upset that I can't do that job.
No, I can hear it. And you're a great loss to the profession.
Because then I'm sad, because how many of us have walked out and who's left? And my colleagues are left suffering. But yet I've taken that choice because of my health. But at the same time, now I've left them all behind. But
so it gets worse. Arguably gets worse for them. And you would track it back, because the government, and this is why I wish it wasn't political. Caroline Flint, I don't know if you've seen this, Joe, the Labour MP, has called for an all-party sort of group on to establish NHS policy in the future, to actually remove it from politics, to agree on some fundamental truths, and then just dedicate the political will and the political effort to making the system as good as it could possibly be. I'd love to live in that world, but for the time being we don't. So trying to leave politics outside of it, you're top of your list of reasons why you couldn't cope anymore, or you didn't want to expose yourself to the possibility of making a mistake anymore, or something like that.
Massively.
Is cuts. They've taken bodies off the wards. Yeah, and you can't function. And even though on paper it says they've got the adequate amount of staff, they haven't, because it doesn't take into account people going off sick due to the stress. And when they say they're spending more money than ever before, you tell me that they're not necessarily spending it in the right places.
Spending it higher up on more managers to run more pieces of paper. They're not spending it on the floor ground staff. And more
is being done privately, which means for every transaction undertaken by a private sector supplier, there is a little bit going in what they call profit.
Yeah.
I've got one more thing to say to you, and this is Declan who's texted this in. I don't know whether I agree with him or not, but he suggested that in future when you describe yourself as a midwife going back to work, it might be best not to use the phrase keeping your hand in.
Oh. Yeah, okay, I get what he means.
Keeping your eye in. Keeping your eye in, Joe. Keeping it topical. Keep your eye in, not your hand. I don't know what he means by that. 28 minutes after 11 is the time. 0345 6060973 is the number. Mary will be up first, but just glancing at the clock, Mary, I'm going to come to you first after the news headlines. I don't want to squeeze you in as a senior sister in A&E. I don't want to squeeze you into the 60 seconds or so remaining. It's approaching 11:30. If I gave you a bit of a shock earlier when I said it was 11:15 when it was in fact 11:45, my apologies. Especially anybody who suddenly realised that they were running or suddenly thought they were running incredibly late. The responsibility, the casual responsibility of radio presenting. You see, you could have given somebody conniptions on that. It's also a minor shake-up. But I'm asking you about the NHS. Jeremy Hunt says 1 in 3 of us shouldn't be in casualty at all. I want you to tell me whether that's true. As an A&E nurse or an A&E doctor, 1 in 3. Now, we've all got a story about someone who's there because he hasn't had a bowel movement for a week, or a panicking parent like me who took his little girl because she had conjunctivitis and he didn't know what to do about it. But then, does he actually mean people like me yesterday when I was driven to distraction by a condition and couldn't see a GP? So I had a brilliant pharmacist near me, actually, who'd kind of put my mind at rest that things will get better this week. But if I hadn't found a brilliant pharmacist, or if things had become unbearable outside opening hours, and if you knew that you were unlikely to get an appointment to see your GP in the normal fashion for 3 weeks, and getting one in an emergency appointment involves taking a day off work, and like me, you're self-employed, and if you don't turn up for work, you don't get paid. And these are big issues. So when Jeremy Hunt says 1 in 3 of us shouldn't be in casualty at all, could you tell me what he means? I'm not sure he would know, but I think you might. He might be right, you know. Maybe we shouldn't be in casualty at all, but what he as Health Secretary omits to add is that 1 in 3 of us shouldn't be in casualty at all, but we are, because we've got nowhere else to go. A&E, what's going on? 0345 6060973. Mary's in Hackney. Mary, what can you tell us?
Hello, James.
Hi,
Good morning.
Hello.
I'm a senior sister in A&E.
Boom. There we go.
I've worked in A&Es across London for 15 years.
Yes.
And things are bad at the moment.
Worst you've seen?
Getting there, yes.
Why?
There are lots of very sick patients who need to be admitted to hospital.
There always are.
Yes, there are. The situation, what we've got at the moment is a situation that we call exit block.
Right.
So we have lots of sick patients in the department, and emergency departments are very good at seeing, assessing and treating sick patients,
yes,
and starting that treatment. But once we have started that, we need to be able to admit those patients into hospital, usually into medical beds.
Yes.
And what we're finding at the moment is there are no beds. The wards are full.
And a large reason for that is that a lot of elderly patients have nowhere to go.
Yes, I believe so. And what we see is that patients from the ward, and despite my colleagues' best intentions, please don't get me wrong.
No, I don't. I
not
understand.
looking to blame the people, to blame the clinicians here, but patients are being discharged inappropriately early.
Which means they're going to come back.
Exactly. We see that in A&E. You know, they might come back 24, 48 hours later if the care package isn't sufficient.
What sort of... this may be too broad a category for you to sort of specify, but what sort of patients will be in that situation? What are we talking about when people are being released when they shouldn't have been and then coming back within 24 or 48 hours? What sort of conditions will they be suffering from?
It could be anything.
Yes.
But just needed a bit more time and a bit more care in hospital.
Okay, if I put you in charge, what would you change first?
We need more beds. We need more. But trouble is, we need more beds. We need more money. We need more staff. We need everything. We don't just need. No point just having doctors and nurses. You need everything that goes with that. You need the therapists alongside. You need the pharmacists. You need the radiographers. You need the lab staff.
Do you think Actually, I'll save that because I want to learn from you. I don't want to ask you to respond to my own pontification. So I'll save the pontification for when we've said goodbye to each other. Going back to 2010, and I know I'm trying to avoid politics, and there was a general election in 2010, but the patient approval ratings then for the NHS, I'm pretty sure, were the highest they have ever been. And in the space of 6 years, we've gone from that to a scenario in which I would not be that surprised to learn they're now the lowest they have ever been, potentially. 6 years. Why? In that 6 years, what do you point at? Are there fewer people? The midwife told us there are actually fewer people doing the job that she does on the wards that she walks. What is it for you as a senior sister in A&E? The biggest difference between 2010, when things were going swimmingly, and 2016, when things are not, is?
Volume of patients.
Just more and more people turning up.
Volume of patients. Nationally, attendance at A&E has gone up. I think the figures are about under 10%. So significant.
Yes.
But my department alone has seen a 12-month increase of 14%.
And you're operating
this time last year, and we are operating in the same number of beds in the department, so the same number of cubicles, same number of nurses, the same number of doctors. So what we're finding at the moment, increased patients coupled with this exit block, so we see and we treat patients. We then can't admit them, so those patients stay in the department. The next patients arrive by ambulance, we offload those patients and the next ones. We run out of space. Usually by about 10:30 in the morning now, my department is full.
Wowzers.
And I am looking at inappropriate, non-clinical areas to put patients.
Which is where we get the people on trolleys in corridors and the horror stories like that. Now,
I can't even give my patients a cup of tea anymore.
Because you're too busy.
Because I have to move the tea. I have to unplug and move the tea trolley to put a patient in that space. We run out of food to give patients in my emergency department by 3 o'clock. I am running an emergency department with 45 sick patients in, and often these patients will need one-to-one nursing. 45 patients, I have one functioning toilet for those patients.
Oh, Lord.
Which is not accessible for patients in wheelchairs. So I I have one non-accessible toilet, I have no facilities to make them hot drinks, and I have no food to give them. And patients see this level of care we are offering, and they think that's what we want to offer.
And then you end up getting the blame, and that's why Nick's brilliant campaign to help people like you who run the risk of being under physical attack from patients becomes all the more urgent. I mean, the last time this happened, it would be very obtuse of me to listen to what you're saying. A couple of people screaming at Twitter about population growth and immigration, and obviously the number of people living in a country calling upon the services that country offers is increases. You need the number of people providing the services to increase as well, and they clearly haven't. But the last time this happened was before your time. The last time we had crises like this being reported relatively regularly was in the mid-1990s. So can you cast over your 15-year career, it kind of almost goes back to the mid-1990s. The system you came into is a hell of a lot better than the one we're in now. What have they done? What have the actual managers done? What have the politicians done to create the circumstances that you describe? What have they done wrong?
I started in A&E just as the 4-hour target was being rolled out.
Yes.
So I'm probably one of the last people who qualified after me won't remember A&E before the 4-hour target.
No.
And we're going back now to where almost the 4-hour target has been forgotten.
Yes.
There are so many targets we have to achieve. Half of my department has been privatised. So everyone who walks in and is seen in what used to be called minors, the walking wounded, are actually being seen by a private company. All of that is privatised.
Right.
All of my portering staff, all of my catering staff are privatised.
Right.
So
go on.
Everyone seems to work to their own schedule.
Yes.
And that's not necessarily
Because in a hospital,
flow dictates.
and I've failed to keep politics out of it, but we won't get party political about it. In a hospital, the idea that you can separate all of these constituent parts of care provision is bogus. The idea that you can
it falls apart.
Right. So you hive off the portering and you say they pay this and X and they do this and they do that, but you're the ward manager or you're the senior sister in A&E, and you kind of want to exercise some control over that and that and this and that.
I have no authority
Boom.
at all over any of the portering staff.
Yeah.
And that's not me wanting, to stand on my desk and start shouting at people.
No, but you want to be in some sense in their chain of command. You want to be involved in that chain. You're just not, because they're privatised and they answer their boss.
Hugely busy emergency department.
Yes.
Patients need to move. I need to be able to tell them which patient to move. And unless they are specifically booked for a specific job, they won't move that patient. They will leave the department without doing any job, and I then have to rebook them for them to walk back.
Yeah. Well, it's a blip. I mean, I hesitate to ask you this question because I think I know the answer. Is there any light at the end of the tunnel?
I don't know.
Well, could you do me a favour?
Of course.
Could you hang in there? We are so grateful for the work that people like you do, and we never get the chance to tell you. And you're so rushed off your feet, you never get the chance to take a moment and just listen to us. We are so grateful for the work that people like you do, and we are so sorry that we leave you to do it in the darkness like this, and only when things reach breaking point do we remember to actually recognise the strain that you're under.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
I do love my job.
I know you do. That's why we're so grateful to you.
I've got incredibly talented doctors and nurses in my department who are just pushed to breaking point because they cannot offer the care that they want to.
And that's like a sort of adding insult to injury in a way, in that you take that vocation and that desire to do good and you almost corrupt it by adding layers of management and privatisation and priorities that people like Mary should not at all have to follow. Mary, thank you so much. Thank you on every level. 11:44 is the time. 03456060 973 is the number you need. I feel a little bit what's the word? I usually throw in that Chomsky quote at this point in proceedings, don't I? The one about if you want to privatise something, you defund it, you demoralise the staff, you essentially destroy it to such a degree that when somebody comes along in shining armour and says, I can fix all of this, all I need is a lot of money and I can make everything better, we throw our doors open and roll out a red carpet. But it seems a fairly cheap response to what Mary's described, even though politically it may be an accurate one. So if the reason why in the 6 years since 2010 the NHS has gone from the highest ever levels of patient support to a situation which, rightly or wrongly, the British Red Cross has described as a humanitarian crisis, responsibility doesn't lie with the Secretary of State for Health. Who the hell does it lie with? If it doesn't actually lie with the people running the health service, who does it lie with? And this is why the old immigration line is so destructive, because it lets them all off the hook. I think that the number of people coming into the country, roughly half of the number of people that are born every year. So if you just look at population increase or population growth, just look at them all as human beings, all needing healthcare, and then ask yourself why they're not getting it, when in 2010 they were, but in the mid-90s they weren't. It's got something to do with what the next chapter of the NHS is going to look like. And Matthew, I think you're being a bit facetious when you say, didn't you just say that the NHS was the finest example of something socialist working? I said, no, mate. I said the foundation of the NHS was about the finest example you'll ever find of an essentially socialist idea being successful. But if you've got privatised porters and privatised caterers and privatised ambulance drivers and privatised paramedics and privatised services at almost every level, someone's shaving off a few quid at every single one of those levels. And when you ask doctors and nurses why they can't provide the service that they want to provide, they tell you they haven't got the resources to do so. So by all means, bring immigration into the argument if you really feel that you have to. And I understand why you do. Sitting in a doctor's waiting room yesterday, and the other 3 patients waiting to see the doctor in Chiswick were not white. Were not white. I mean, I can't really say any more than that. You know me, I don't care about that any more than I care about what star sign they were. But if I really did care about that, or if I had someone pouring the poison into my ear, trying to spread the sort of hatred that leaves MPs dead on the streets of our country, if I was susceptible to that kind of bile, yeah, I'd have sat there, and the woman in the headscarf who went in to see the doctor before I did, I probably could have got myself into a tizzy about that. So by all means, keep mentioning it. But don't forget that when somebody tells you that the resources have been cut to a point where they can't provide the service that they want to provide, and somewhere within that chain of service, at various different levels, somebody else is shaving off a few quid for shareholders, you can't pretend there's not a relationship between the two scenarios. Or maybe you can, in which case 0345 606 0973. I probably have to hand back various membership cards after I admit this to you. I do find it difficult to believe sometimes that it is quite as cynical as some suggest, that there is a political will to privatise the National Health Service. I don't know why would I find it difficult to believe? Look at what they've done to something as straightforward in front of us as taxi drivers, black cab drivers. Somebody somewhere sitting in a boardroom looks at something that's operating perfectly well, thank you very much, and wonders how they can get some of that money out of the pockets of ordinary people, in this case taxi drivers. So they come up with Uber, which really covered itself in glory yesterday, didn't it, during the tube strike? Oh, James, you got to move with the times, mate. You got to stop sticking up for the cab drivers, especially the horrible ones who are always trolling you on Twitter. Why do you stick up for them? Because they're having their livelihoods robbed from beneath them, and that's something that all decent people should stand up to protect. Yeah, but Uber's the future. That's the future. Do you realise they're going to charge you 4 times the normal wage in the event of there being industrial action on public transport, and cab drivers will have to carry on charging you the same? Oh, does it? What? What? Oh boy, that's kind of, for me, and I've given up on the effort of keeping politics out of this hour. For me, that's the definition of lazy right-wing politics. So you think you're fine, you think you're going to benefit from it, and people warn you that you won't, and then when they discover that you're right, you really are going to get spanked by these people. What do you think is going to happen if they succeed in driving the black cabs off the road? What if they end up with a monopoly on things? You think you're going to be better off? You really think you're going to save money? And yet still, despite seeing that so clearly, despite seeing all my predictions come true about it'll be allotments next, and then someone sent me a story from the Midlands about the council trying to take over the allotments and flog them to a developer. Graveyards, everywhere they look, they just see people getting on with their lives happily and normally and earning a relatively decent crust, and they think, how can we get a piece of that action? How can we get even richer? And then you look at the NHS and you think, well, maybe this is a stopped clock moment. Maybe those little memes that fly around on the internet about defund, demoralise, destroy, then privatise, maybe they're true. And of course, the biggest help for those people doing that? To blame everything on Immigration Brigade. Every single time you get someone standing up in public saying it's all the fault of immigration, you can hear the dollar signs clicking in the eyes of the kind of people that benefit when the NHS gets sold off to people who will make a profit. Oh, it's all the fault of immigration. It's not. And I mean, as Julie points out, in fact, if you really want to bring immigration into this debate, you'd have to recognise the fact that recent arrivals in this country are A, more likely to be working for the NHS, and B, a lot less likely than the rest of us to need it. Growing older population, that's the real problem when Mary describes the problem of people who've got nowhere to go. She hasn't got enough beds to put people in because the people in the beds haven't got anywhere else to go. The social care, 3 things, and I know it's boring, and I know it's not exactly the way to put bums on seats, but prisons, child mental health, and hospitals, those are the time bombs in this country, and the longer we keep banging on about the EU and immigration, the closer those bombs come to detonating, and they're getting closer every day. Even Theresa May's recognised it with regard to child mental health. Loved that speech announcing how important it is that she delivered without mentioning the thousands of people that have actually lost their jobs in the provision of care in that field as a direct result of austerity. Oh, we really need to do more for child mental health. Well, Prime Minister, you could start by not sacking people or making redundant people who are already working in the sector. Hey, I'm no genius. I'm no politician. But if you've got a problem that needs to be fixed by people, then probably sacking the people that were previously fixing that problem was not a good idea. But I appreciate that was probably all George Osborne's fault and absolutely nothing to do with the Home Secretary. It's 11:56. Lee's in Uxbridge. Lee, what have you got?
Hello, James. First time caller.
You're very, very welcome.
First time listener.
Thank you, Lee.
I'm a little bit nervous, but
it's only
I just
me.
want to reiterate that what is happening in A&E is the same thing happening in the wards. You think someone come in with a leg injury, for instance, and you find out that they've got a host of other problems,
yes,
maybe even dementia, which will keep them on the ward for X amount of time,
yes,
because you have to look after them, prepare them, and then you have problems sending them out. But at the same time, since I've joined nursing in 2011, there hasn't been a day that I've looked in a paper and saw something positive about NHS.
What can we do about that, Lee? What can we do about it? Because there must have. I mean, it's not news, is it? It's bloody tickets for the ghost train again instead of the speak away machine, or even just a kind of nice little card or a bunch of flowers for you. No one's ever going to win votes or popularity contests by being nice. You win these battles by being horrible, by making people frightened and angry. It sells newspapers. How do we fix that?
I don't think people generally care. That's how I feel right now.
You're probably right.
If I look at a petition on the government website, I'll see a petition for a dog to become a police officer, gaining more support than nurses getting paid, because the starting rate for a nurse these days are like £11.20. You can go up to the most senior nurse and get £40,000. You might say that's enough, but you're running a whole hospital, so anything happens underneath you, you're only getting that.
Yeah, but you're not making money, mate. You're not making money. So in the 21st century Britain, or post-2010 Britain, if you're not making money, you don't really deserve to get paid a decent whack.
But at the same time, you come in and do a 12-hour shift, leave work crawling on the ground.
Mate, I wouldn't last 12 minutes doing what you do for a living. I'm squeamish. I don't like bodily functions. I'm frightened of sort of some medical conditions. I wouldn't. The job you do is driving me mad. How are we going to fix it?
Well, the government says that they're putting in more money, but at the same time, most of my friends that I've started with have left because they're literally suffering. They have to work overtime. They can't manage it, so they just leave.
And then it's prisons. So then they bring it, then they privatise it and say we can do a better job, we can fix it. And then I don't know what the healthcare equivalent of a prison riot is, but that's what happens 5 years down the line. And it's so bloody obviously.
You can get more money working privately, but the petition that started today by Nick.
Yes.
Nick. Half the reports don't go in because it takes 30 minutes or 20 minutes just to file the report. And some of the patients you kind of understand because of the medication they're under sometimes.
Of course. Or language issues as well.
Yeah, so half the things you don't expect, but the general public only care about themselves in the end.
Oh, what a bleak conclusion. I can't finish this conversation now. I can't leave that there. The general public don't only care about themselves. It's just the people making all the noise at the moment only care about themselves. I refuse to believe that Britain has somehow ceased to be a country built upon compassion and tolerance and kindness, built upon the very principles that formed the foundation stones of the National Health Service. And if you read, even at the time when Aneurin Bevan was trying to set it up, even at the time you had people arguing that they shouldn't be looking after the poor, or you shouldn't be looking after them, and even, would you believe, the 1950s, as those foundation stones were being laid, you had people moaning about healthcare being provided to foreigners. Plus ça change, my friends. Interesting. I sort of got a bit upset at the end of the last hour about the notion that there was a nurse that was describing a nation of people who are so selfish. We don't look after people anymore. We don't want to look after people anymore. We're going to look after ourselves. I don't buy that. I really don't. But if I was Lee, working on a ward, seeing it in front of me every day, maybe I would. But if you follow me on Twitter, at Mr. James OB, have a look at something I retweeted from Incorrigible FCA a tweet or two ago. It's just referring to the conversation we had in the first hour of the programme this morning about Jeremy Corbyn's maximum wage suggested. Just really, really interesting research into the relationship between high pay and performance, and it pretty much makes a nonsense of that claim that you have to pay these people £20 million a year, otherwise you simply won't get the best candidates. I think we heard one in our Vox Pops. It's the first thing you hear, because it's what we've been conditioned to believe by people who would consider £20 million a year to be a pittance. It's what we've been conditioned to believe by the men who own newspapers like The Sun and the Daily Mail. Anyone who complains about other people earning loads of money, you can't get the right people unless they're free to earn hundreds of millions and gazillions of pounds. Well, just have a look at that article from the Financial Times that I retweeted. It's really, really interesting. I held off from recommending it to you until I had a proper look at it myself. I'm looking forward to Jeremy Corbyn's speech later today. Not forward enough to actually watch the thing, but I look forward to picking over the carcass of it and seeing what it is he has got to say, because there has to be room. There has to be room for improvement in the way that we do things. And if we can just turn down the volume on the people blaming everything on immigration, which is so scary now. You can't have a conversation about it. If you were a politician, man, you'd be so grateful, wouldn't you, to the Race 8 preachers? You'd love them. Jeremy Hunt must be secretly laughing his socks off. Yeah, it's all gone very badly, but we'll be able to flog it all off to our mates soon. And we've still got our race hate preachers banging on about how everything's the fault of immigration, so no one's ever really going to blame us for this anyway. Well, look, let's just count the number of people who came here. None of them were ill, but doesn't matter. It's all their fault. I've got to find another way. It'll be very interesting to hear what Jeremy Corbyn has to say later today. I'm going to continue with this for a little bit longer because I want it from the inside, as it were. 0345 6060 973. How bad is it? Answer very. Why? Answer a little less susceptible to consensus, shall we say. Julie's in Berkhamsted. Julie, what made you pick up the phone?
Hi, James.
Hey,
I'm a first-time caller today.
You're very welcome. When you say you're a first-time caller today, do you mean you've rung in loads of times, but this is the first time today that you've...
Yeah. Just something I'm quite passionate about.
Of course
I've been working in the NHS for 21 years, and I've been qualified for 18 years, and I've had a very varied career. I was in the A&E for 6 years, so I was sister in A&E. I've worked in the GP surgery for 10 years or 12 years. And I've been in the community for 2.
All right. Do you, I know you've phoned up on a very serious matter, but do you want a Ray Liotta for that or not?
No, you're right.
Oh, come on. You've just given us a full lit. All right, no, you're in charge. It's your call. You carry on. You've got a Ray Liotta if you want one. It's in the bank, Julie, all right?
Thank you. So basically, I've been in the NHS for 20 years and I've seen quite a lot of change. I've never seen things as bad as they are. Even in the days where I used to work in A&E and we'd have 9 or 10 hour waiting times. The community is really different to hospitals. Obviously, hospitals can say we're full, we are on red alert, we can't take any more patients, but in the community we can't actually do that. So people keep getting sent home, there's no cut-off, we can't say, you know, hold on, we've got a full caseload. They're just coming out and the district nurses are on their knees. They're so busy that they just can't keep up.
And
people are coming home early, they're getting bounced straight back into hospital.
Now talk me through that. Talk me through that, because you're the second. I think it was a sister, an A&E sister, who said that first. People coming home early and then having to come back to hospital. Just talk us through how that happens.
Well, my role currently, I'm one of the matrons in the community, and I see a lot of people who have got lots of ongoing chronic health conditions. They'll go into hospital, they'll be sent home early, they're not ready to come home from the point of view of some of them actually can't even get to the kitchen to make a cup of tea for themselves, and they'll have a fall and then they're back in the next day, or they'll come home to a lack of care package and they're back in because they can't be at home, they're not safe.
That's kind of like Victorian, isn't it? Or Dickensian, rather. This, and I know, the conditions then were considerably, incomparably worse than they are now. But this is, I'm never going to win an election by telling you how much I care about those people, am I?
No, probably not.
I'm never going to get a newspaper column. I'm never going to get a seat on a TV show, or I don't mean me personally. I'm just thinking about why these aren't more urgent issues. And the answer is, here's an old person who's lonely, he's got no carers, he's not very well, he's in hospital, they need the bed, they sling him out, he's not ready to be released, he goes home, he falls over, he's back again by tea time. Who speaks for him? Who speaks for him, Julie?
We do. I'm absolutely exhausted trying to admit patients when I'm told, when I phone up the hospitals, there's no beds. And I say, well, the patient can't stay at home, they're not safe, and it becomes my problem. There's one of me, I can't be there every day, every minute of every day for the people I see, and we can't arrange care. There's no carers out there. It can take sometimes a month, 6 weeks to get a care package up and running. What do you do in that time?
Okay, well, the problem with these things is that we've boiled a frog, haven't we? It's not as if they turned up one day and just told you, right, we're turning your working experience on its head. They've boiled a frog. This has crept up on us very, very slowly. It's been incremental change. But if you had to pinpoint a position at which it began to go wrong, what would you pinpoint? I
would pinpoint when I was back in my days in A&E, so this is going back 19 years ago.
Yes.
Within the first 4 months of me starting in the job, one of our local hospitals shut its medical beds, and we went from having an empty A&E overnight where we would clean the department, get ready for the next day, make sure we were stocked up, to having 16 patients overnight. Overnight, literally, it closed on a Saturday, and on Monday we had 16 patients. There were full ward in A&E, and it's never recovered.
And what reason were you given for that decision? Was it explained to you in shiny management speak?
They were closing a hospital to make us an acute trust, and other hospitals were going to become community hospitals. Overnight, we had a bed crisis, and it's never recovered. They built
It's incredible, isn't it?
bigger hospital, they've put more wards, but you open the wards, they're full overnight. Literally overnight they're full, and you never recover. So there's not enough beds, there's not enough hospitals, there's not enough staff to deal with the population we have.
You don't have to answer this question, but is it just incompetence? And I mean, all people have seen management consultants come into their place of work and walk away with their pockets groaning with gold, having made the working experience of everyone back at the office worse. Is it just all a little bit rubbish, or can you see a sinister subtext, the notion that if they make it really, really bad, then when they announce it's all being sold to Richard Branson or G4S, then we won't kick up a fuss?
I think there is I remember again a consultant coming in, not a consultant, medical consultant.
A management consultant,
yeah.
Yes.
Came in to try and, this is when the 4-hour turnaround came in, that we needed to speed things up. They managed to turn A&E round in 4 hours, but it was, again, as one of your last callers said, you can't get them out the other side.
No, but a management consultant doesn't see that. They just see a widget, don't they, or a conveyor belt with biscuits on it.
We've been successful in A&E. We're turning them around in 4 hours now, so that's fine. But then you're pushing them out the other end, and they're coming back in A&E again. I think there's far too much politics and paperwork. Just give people more staff and they'll do the job better and they'll do the job more efficiently. Keep cutting staff, it's going to get worse and it's going to get worse.
And, of course, one of the great camouflages for cutting staff is the old immigration argument, which clearly is relevant to the size of the population. But if they're cutting staff, the argument that there are too many people here is just redundant. If you're cutting staff for what you've already got, and it doesn't matter whether numbers are going up or staying the same, you're making it worse for everybody.
I think numbers are definitely going up, but I think the problem we have is, it's been on the cards for a very long time, is this ageing population.
Of course it is. And just to clarify for the hate preacher fans, you said ageing, then, not Asian.
Ageing.
Yeah.
Yes,
just need to, we live in strange times, Julia. Falls to me to point that out. Thank you. And again, as I said to Mary, thank you for what you do. I don't want to turn this into some sort of, rose-tinted radio experience, but my God, it's time we started finding a few more moments in our day to appreciate what people like Julie do. And speaking of well, look, Dave's in Pulborough. I think he's a doctor. Dave, what made you pick up the phone?
Hi, we've spoken before about this sort of thing. And
you're a GP, right?
To give the other... That's right, yeah. I've actually moved since I last spoke to you because things were so horrendous in my last place. But there are three strands to this. First off is that people are getting older with conditions that even 10 years ago would have killed them.
Yeah.
And they require an enormous amount of care and support from all the different services. The second, and one of the more important ones, I think, is that people have this expectation that they must be completely well at all times. Nobody wants to have a cough for a couple of days.
Really? How long have you been a doctor?
15 years.
And has that changed then in a decade and a half? I think I know what you mean. You mean people turning up to see you who frankly should just be having a lemsip and getting on with it?
Nobody will do that anymore. No, because they've read the papers, they understand that we're not working hard enough, that we're all overpaid, we're all lazy, and it's immigrants taking all their kids. So why can't I be seen? I want to be seen with my cough.
Right.
I'm going on holiday tomorrow, and I need to be well for my holiday, and you need to do something about that.
Which is not only annoying, it's insulting to you as well.
Well, yes, it is. I said to someone the other day, do you honestly think I've got a drawer full of special pills that I could give you to make you better, but I don't want to? And she said, yes, I think that's true. That's to say you're not supposed to give me anything when I want you.
And I bet you're giving them to all the Muslims instead.
It's not even that. It's people have been fed this. When you read stories in the Daily Mail,
there it is, the security services intervening as Dave was about to take a tilt at the mainstream media. Seriously, Corbyn fans, that's how it works. 12:14 is the time. 0345 606 0973 is the number that you need. And it is, I think, close to consensus. The problem we have here is possibly deliberate. Or at least in the sense that we are deliberately looking in the wrong places for explanations as to why what's gone wrong has gone wrong. If you want to change the record, you know what to do. 0345 6060973. But actually, having spent an hour on this and intending to stop, the first hour trying in vain to keep politics out of it, let's go all in on the politics now. Let's go all in on the politics, because I'm told by this texter that Virgin Healthcare already run half of her emergency ward. I don't know if that's true. Jamie points out the bottom line is we need more hospitals, not shut 3 and build one so-called super hospital. This texter says the Tories see poor patient care as collateral damage. They don't actually care about care. They want to wipe out all memory of the idea of the social good of the NHS. And of course the ageing population are being used as an explanation. They are not being blamed. I want to clarify that, because as quite a few of you have pointed out, it's that population that helped pay for the setup of the NHS in the beginning. Well, sort of. I mean, everybody pays for the NHS. Everybody who pays tax, everybody who pays national insurance pays for the NHS. But the idea that everybody is living 10 years longer and getting diseases that need more care, I just don't see where it leads until someone stands up and says, I've got the answer, just give me all the money and put me in charge, and we'll be laughing all the way to the blood bank. It's 12:16. Sarah and Dave over in Derry, I'll ask you about Irish politics, Dave, be warned. John and Adam and Josh, I will come to you, I promise, but I just want to free up some phone lines as well for just try a little experiment, okay? Don't send me a rude text telling me that I'm an enemy of aspiration or anything like that. Just listen to this that's just gone up in the wall in Gordon's GP surgery. Okay, this is literally, send me a photograph of a notice that's gone up on the wall in his surgery, and tell me why it's not a problem. Okay, that's the challenge for you. Okay, I've got enough calls to carry on with this conversation. 0345 606 0973 for as long as I want. We could go way beyond 1 o'clock if we wanted, but we won't. I want to hear more from within the NHS about what's going on. I've actually got a better picture than I had at the beginning. That's what happens when you actually listen to people and ask people inside a system what's wrong with that system, rather than those with vested interests and pulpits to sell. But I want to keep some phone lines free. If you can just tell us why, the rest of us, why this isn't bad. Because I think this is terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. And yet, I'd rather not. I'm not one of those people that turns to the media every morning in the hope of being enraged and terrified. Often happens, but I don't actively seek it. This has gone up in Gordon's local GP. Virgin Care will provide some community health services from later this year. Dartford, Gravesham, Swanley, CCG and Swale CCG have awarded a contract to provide adult community services to Virgin Care following a robust procurement process. These services remain part of the NHS, and you will continue to receive NHS care free at the point of need, just as you do now. I've seen a problem already. Just as you do now. Virgin Care has been commissioned to provide the services, quotes, as is, end quotes, without any changes to the services being provided, and you should not see any changes to your care. This is how it happened. This is how it happened. Every call we've had, whether it's from the senior sister on an A&E ward, whether it's from the woman who is now community nursing because midwifery had become an untenable proposition, whether it is from any of the callers we've had, the GP in Pulborough, this is how it happened. If anything about the service or the way that we care for you was planned to change, then we would discuss this with you in advance, as would happen now. If you have any questions about the change of the provider of the community adult services in Dartford, Gravesham, Swanley and Swale, then you can get in touch with the current provider or with Virgin Care directly. And then it gives you, somewhat frighteningly, the Virgin Care customer services team. Now, look, I know it's easy to score lazy points on issues like this, but even the presence of the word customer on that poster instead of the word patient concerns me, and seems to me to point towards a future where the bits of the NHS that are still doing well will end up looking a lot like the bits of the NHS that we've learned today are not doing well at all. And listen, politics, you're right, it was naive and foolish of me to suggest in the last hour that we could have a conversation about the health service and somehow leave politics at the door, because every single time we got a picture painted for us that looked horrible, you wanted to work out why it was so horrible, and the answer is almost always going to be politics. However, I still would say to you now that I can't, even though I can see it happening with regard to everything from from black cab drivers right across to firefighters. I still don't believe necessarily, and I know Jeremy Hunt's even written a book about it. How can I sit here and say that? Jeremy Hunt has written a book about why it would be a good idea, or at least contributed a chapter to a book about why it would be a good idea to privatise the NHS. And yet I still sit here. Is that how they get away with it? Because of idiots like me? They can't be that. They can't be that cynical, can they? They can't be that. Is that how they actually do it? Because some of us sit here, some of us are idiots, right? And we have been persuaded that punching ourselves in the face would be a really good thing to do. Let's all because hey, yes, we must look after the rich people because tug for lot. So all right, so there'll be some cheerleaders who are literally voting for a diminishment in the care they will receive when they're older. I get that. That's your classic Steinbeck. We've been there a billion times. No such thing as poverty, just temporarily frustrated millionaires. But then there's people like me who I just still can't quite believe it's that cynical and that out there. Too trusting? Virgin Care will provide some community health services from later this year. Come here a minute, because this is the bit that matters, isn't it? These services remain part of the NHS and you will continue to receive NHS care free at the point of need, just as you do now. Virgin has been commissioned to provide the services, quotes, as is, end quotes, without any changes to the services being provided, and you should not see any changes to your care. What has caller after caller after caller told us today about the care we can expect to receive from them? They're telling us it has diminished and it has diluted, and that one of the, if not the main reason for that, is the privatisation of some aspects of that care. You heard Mary talking about how the porters and the caterers and the cleaners and sundry other providers of care within the context of her A&E ward work for private companies. They don't work for her. They don't work for the same employer as her. And come on! I mean, what do they do when they get a contract like that? Do they sit there and say, ooh, I think we should spend all of the money we've received from that healthcare trust on looking after patients? No, they don't. The first thing they do when they sit down is work out how much more of that money they can keep for themselves. Why do governments do it? Why do councils do it? Why do healthcare trusts do it? Because it's really tough to run things well. Someone comes along, do not look at the old man behind the curtain. Someone comes along, says, I can do it. I can do it for you. I am the great and magnificent Oz. Virgin Care. I'll do it for you. Politicians don't care, especially not the people running the country at the moment. They won't be going to NHS hospitals soon. They'll be going to Bupa ones or Virgin Care ones. And everybody who thinks it's a good idea and thinks it's a enemy of aspiration to talk about things in these terms, but who isn't rich, where are you going to end up? Euthanasia booths, probably. I'm sorry to be so bleak, but Gordon's, this is why it's why it's your show as much as mine. That's on the wall in Gordon's GP. My challenge to you now for the last half an hour of the programme is very simply, tell me why that's not a problem. Tell me why that's great. Tell me why that's wonderful. Tell me why that's proof that we're moving in the right direction. Reassure my quivering heart that taking something that's currently under NHS control and therefore devoid of any profit motive and putting it into private sector control, which is governed entirely by profit motive, is not necessarily a bad thing. Because in my naive, idealistic little way, I'd really love to believe you. Sarah's in Greenwich. Sarah, what made you pick up the phone?
Basically, I'm a nurse, been qualified for over 10 years. I worked within the NHS for 7 of those. I currently do agency now because I can work as and when I choose to. I have 2 small children. I mean, in my opinion, I think there are a number of factors contributing to this mass crisis that we have in the NHS.
Is it a mass crisis, or are we getting a bit tabloid?
It's
yeah, I think I would as well.
It's getting worse. I mean, sort of everyone is aware, obviously, the population is getting older, so there's more strain on the services for these.
And this is beyond serious. This is. I mean, every single person listening to this programme not only knows somebody who fits into the category you describe, but quite possibly is somebody who fits into the category you describe, or is related to someone who is living longer than they would have done 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and as a result of that, developing conditions that need a hell of a lot more care than they ever would have needed before, at a time when the provision of care is actually being reduced.
It is, and not just being reduced, but one of the main factors is staffing as well. I mean, I worked in one NHS for 7 years, and being agency, I've worked at a number of different trusts, and everywhere is the same. Very short-staffed. They can't fill in their overtime shifts with their bank staff, and they're going out to agency because they can't fill those positions. It hasn't.
And if they go out to agency, I'm not blaming you for this, but it's going to cost them more than it is if it's someone on the staff per hour, right?
Yes. I mean, I know.
And you get paid, but also someone takes a bit of the money that has been paid for your shift and just keeps it for the.
Yes.
Because they're already rich and they've invested in that company.
Yes, basically.
Ah!
Not only
Sorry.
that. What's recently occurred with they've stopped the student bursaries. Now, the reason I went into nursing, I used to work for Barclays Bank, funny enough, for a couple of years.
Blimey.
And I went into nursing because it's in my family. My aunt did it. My dad used to be a medic in the armed forces. And I chose to go in. I wouldn't have gone in had it not been for the bursary. Now, the majority of people that were on my course at the time were sort of late 20s, early 30s. There were some in their 40s. The youngest on my course was 54. Now, this sort of, I mean, I don't know who in their right mind would take out a 30 grand loan nowadays to go and study to become a nurse. Which
is what they'd have to do, because the bursary was there to effectively mean that you could become a nurse without having an enormous debt hanging over your head for the rest of your natural.
Exactly, but it wasn't even that big anyway. I mean, I took a pay cut of half just to go and study nursing.
I'm sure, yes.
I mean, I had a mortgage. Well, I've still got a mortgage. A lot of people on my courses, children, they've got mortgages. They've left, jobs that were paying very, very well to study to become a nurse. I mean, I'm sure the government must think that people that go into nursing to study nursing, a 17-year-old have just left school. Now, that doesn't happen nowadays.
No, of course not.
And I don't know anyone in their right mind who has got children, or even haven't got children, but they're in a property or they're renting, who want to go and take out a 30 grand student
bursary,
loan. Yeah. To be a nurse. I mean, the student.
I'm late for the news, Sarah. Do you want me to come back to you?
Yes, please.
Right, you're right there, because this is what you have to do. You've got to let these people speak. No one else is bloody listening. The politicians certainly aren't. Forgive my friend. So, here's the thing, okay? 0345 6060 973. We're talking about the situation in the NHS. We'll go back to Sarah imminently, but I've deliberately cleared 4 phone lines into the studio. There's a total of 10 phone lines into the studio. Ordinarily, from about 10 past 10 until 1 o'clock, they're pretty much chocker, but you know that you just keep pressing the buttons, you will get through eventually. Doesn't mean you will get on. If you want to understand the thinking behind that, I refer you to a piece in The Observer on Sunday about the programme. It was beautiful, actually. I couldn't have written it better myself. But some stuff in there about my late dad, that if you're kind enough to listen to the programme on a regular basis, you'll know just how much that meant to me. The fellow who did the interview, did the profile, he really researched it, which is kind of unfashionable now in modern journalism. So I'm keeping 3 or 4 phone lines free, because I want someone to ring me and tell me why we shouldn't be remotely worried about the fact that Gordon's GP surgery, and he's not the only one, lots of you have followed him, just put a sign up in the reception, in the waiting room, telling them that they're now going to be, some of the services, some of the adult care services are now going to be provided by Virgin Care. Right? And I observe, I think accurately, that means money that was previously spent exclusively within the context of those adults needing care, some of it will now end up in the pockets of Virgin Care shareholders. Right? We can all agree on that, can't we? And yeah, okay, maybe you can run it even better and save money and still have some left over for a profit. Maybe you can. But I haven't yet got anyone who's taken up that challenge. And that's quite worrying. 0345 6060 973. Poster goes up in doctors' waiting rooms saying we're privatising some of the stuff that is currently done by the NHS. Then you look at the statistics that come in and they're right. I get sent the stuff that says 75% of the new contracts that have been handed out in the NHS since 2012 have gone to private companies. And you look into it and it's true. On an as-is basis. That phrase happens on the programme sometimes. That is going to stick in my mind forever. They've got the gig, Virgin Care, on an as-is basis. So the promise is things will carry on exactly as they are. What are we talking about today? We're talking about NHS provisions that have been farmed out to the private sector on an as-is basis, and it is currently nothing like what it was when the deal was done on that. Anyway, enough from me. Back to the professional. Sarah's in Greenwich. Sorry, Sarah, I interrupted you.
That's fine.
Where were we?
Going back to the numbers of nurses coming into the
yes.
now. I mean, I understand just recently there were statistics that there's been a 20% decrease in people attending university now to study to become a nurse since the the stoppage of the student bursary.
I met 2 student doctors yesterday, third-year medical students, and they were describing confusion, really, and just not knowing about what their profession was going to look like when they graduate.
I mean, back in the 1960s and 70s, I understand there was a mass recruitment of nurses. Now, you've got all those nurses that are now coming to retirement, so within the next 5 years, you've got a hell of a lot of nurses that are due to retire, but you haven't got new nurses coming into those positions. So what are NHS Trust doing? They're having to go abroad to recruit from abroad because they can't fill the spaces needed, and yet they're not investing in people, in the service over here to recruit nurses from
and even if they did suddenly start training them up, they're asking them to pay for their own training now in a way that they never had to do. I mean, that's a story.
It's not like a normal student. I mean, with student nurses, they have a longer academic year. They start from September right through to July, or May through to I forget what the main take is.
Doesn't matter.
They do a whole 3 years. They not only do have to do 37.5 hours a week on a placement, sometimes even longer. They have to obviously do their studies at university. They have to do thousands and thousands of hours worth of training before they're even qualified. I mean, I remember on my course when I started, especially with the midwives, there was 40 midwives that started. By the end of the 3rd year, there was 8 that were qualified. A lot of people had dropped out sort of one, not just because they failed the course, but because of affordability. They couldn't afford to stay on the course. On my nursing course, there was over 300. By the time we finished at the end of 3 years, there was 80 nurses, and that was a mixture of general nurses and mental health nurses and learning disability nurses. It's just, and now they're making it harder for people to...
And you have a Prime Minister who stands up in public and talks about how important it is to do more for mental health care, without mentioning that they've jettisoned thousands and thousands of mental health care professionals since 2010.
I mean, I know sort of the RSN have been campaigning to have a ratio for nurse-patient ratio. I mean, yesterday I was on a shift. I had 9 patients, all what we would class as double-handers. Elderly patients needed 2 people to care, each taking at least half an hour to sort of, help wash, clean, feed breakfast, things like that, with 1 HCA. And, we had a patient ratio to staff, more staff makes for better care at the end of the day. And it's a shame when you go home feeling that you haven't done your best because of the restraints that you have against you.
Can I ask you to comment on your boss's description this morning? Jeremy Hunt.
I work for agency. So
no, but ultimately, Jeremy Hunt is your boss, ultimately. And he's told Sky News this morning that the NHS was prepared for winter, but that did not stop things falling over in a couple of places. Do you feel reassured?
No, not at all. I mean, every year, since even as a student, by the time I got to the end of the 3rd year, when I become a qualified nurse, we used to dread winter because we knew the increase of patients that would be coming in. Now, sort of 5-6 years down the line, it seems to be all year now, I'd say, because of the ageing population. I mean, they can't help it, but it's just the way things are going. There's an increase in the need to use the services. It also hasn't helped that, yes, hospitals have been closed, but also walk-in centres where patients can go to walk-in so they don't have to go to A&E have been closed, or they have to ring 111 before they can get a referral to the walk-in. So at the end of the day, a lot of people are going to think, well, I'm not going to ring 111, I'll just walk to A&E because it's easier for me to walk in, and especially if they can't get a GP appointment or their GPs are fully booked. I mean, lucky enough where I live, a lot of the GPs run a walk-in service in the morning where you can just turn up and then be seen. Okay, you might have to wait for an hour or 2 hours, but at least you'll get seen. But I don't know if that runs across the board. The board. And when
I know you're part of it now, and I make no criticism of you for that. Crikey, we've all got to earn a crust, and we want the best sort of work-life balance we can find. But I mean, as an agency nurse, can you reassure me that seeing a Virgin Care sign going up in my doctor's waiting room is not a cause for concern? I
wouldn't be able to comment on that.
Fair enough.
I mean, it's down to, I think, the people that are getting the funds for that too, who are outsourcing, because it's not the acute trust. The acute trusts don't receive the money at the end of the day. It goes to the social sector, and that's another thing. There's not enough funding in the social funding for social care. I mean, I've seen patients that have been in hospitals for 2 or 3 months because they're waiting on care packages. They're waiting on...
how many times have we heard that phrase today? I've had patients in hospital for 2 or 3 months because they're waiting on care packages, and that means you can't release them until you're confident that they're going to be looked after outside hospital.
And that comes down to social services at the end of the day.
What legislation protects that? Do you know? I don't. Do you know what legislation protects that?
I don't know. All I'm aware is, where I used to work, once a patient was medically fit for discharge, we would notify the social services. So they're medically fit. You need now to get your backside into gear to get things running. And from what I understand, they will start getting charged for the patient being in hospital, because the longer a patient is in hospital, they're blocking a bed, and then you get the knock-on effect going right back to A&E. So when hospitals are saying we've got no beds, it wouldn't, 90% of hospitals generally would be because they are full of patients that are waiting to go back home, that are medically fit, that are waiting for care packages to be put in place, or waiting to go to nursing.
How do you make it, forgive me for using an inappropriate word at this point, how do we make this sexy? How do we actually make this, even if we were hate preachers, how would we use this to actually improve the situation? How do you take a situation where accident and emergency provision or healthcare provision across the board is being compromised by elderly patients, vulnerable, in hospital for months because social services can't get a package in place to look after them when they come out? How do you make that a vote winner? How do you turn it into an issue?
I couldn't say.
Well, you just keep doing what you're doing.
I think a lot of management of staff that are not. I think people that need to be sort of running, trust and NHS are those that have been from the ground up. Those that have been working on the ground, that know what it's like on the floor. Not someone that's just done a degree and then just come in, as a business manager kind of thing. I mean, those that are in the know, those that have done the job, those that have been there, they know sort of what's what, and it's those that are not sort of up there.
Well, and then I don't know whether it's tongue-in-cheek or not, but someone just texted saying it's good to privatise because then the unions don't get involved, and it suddenly occurred to me when you just mentioned that actually what the unions sometimes do is provide what you've just described, which is the people who've been doing the job for years. I'd rather trust them on what's safe and what isn't than some sort of Johnny-come-lately management consultant. I haven't checked this, Katrina, so I'm going to tread a little bit carefully on the things that you actually specify. It's a private sector health company. They have been running local services in our area for the last 5 years, but have just lost the bleep, bleep, bleep contract. That's just a geographical specific, because I can't triple check while I'm live on air. Sarah, thank you so much. They have been okay to work for, but part of the problem with the NHS is there's been so much reorganisation. This is my 9th reorganisation in 26 years. The service is being splintered with different organisations running different services, even in the same area. Well, that's what happens when you farm out stuff rather than centralise it. I would have thought, but I'd like to be wrong. No one's ringing in to tell me that I am yet. 0345 6060 973. We are short of staff due to stress, as clients are more complex and need a higher level of care. Even when jobs are advertised, no one is applying. There's a lack of education funding, and there has been very little pay increase to encourage people to work in a highly stressful job. But don't forget, we're all in it together. I haven't mentioned Brexit yet today. Well, I will now. The deputy, let me get his job description correct, it's very important. The Deputy Director General of the Royal United Services Institute has been looking at our military future post-Brexit and has warned that France is poised to take Britain's senior position in NATO. This amid claims that our role within the alliance could be at threat after Brexit. So we've been number 2 in the alliance. There's all these things about Britain that were actually really cool and quite impressive. No one ever kind of reminded us or told us about them, did they? Currently number 2 in the alliance. We have been since 1951, but there is already some discussion of the possibility that the assignment of the position might have to be transferred to a NATO member that is a member of the EU, said the Deputy Director General, Professor Malcolm Chalmers. It might not happen, but I just thought you'd rather know. In the same way that the incoming Secretary of State for Trade in Donald Trump's administration might not be right when he says this is a great opportunity for American companies to pick up all the business that we're going to lose as a result of leaving the European Union. That's the Donald Trump that is supposed to be the friend of the Brexiteers. That's his incoming Secretary of State for Trade saying it's a great opportunity, huge opportunity just to take money out of the pockets of British businesses and therefore British workers. But hey, you might be able to get a purple passport soon. Adam's in Epping. Adam, back to the NHS. What would you like to say?
Yeah, hi James. Thanks for giving us poor nurses a talk on the issue.
Whenever you want it, my friend. Whenever you want it.
When I start off by talking a bit about why nursing has changed. I've been a staff nurse for many years now, and I've seen so many changes. And I think one of the biggest problems was when they made it more academic than it needs to be. They basically took you away from being a student nurse to make you having a degree.
Yes.
A friend of mine is now doing it. It is so hard, James, and this they're making it so academic that basically it's becoming impractical to deal with patients. The amount of bureaucracy is going through the roof. You've got an organisation called the Care Quality Commission that comes in basically bullying nurses.
Well, as I said, you'll always have a platform to air your grievances, but the Care Quality Commission are the only body in place, aren't they, to tell us when there's a kind of mid-staffs on the horizon and that sort of thing?
They are and they aren't, because they come in, but the stress we're under already when they come on... It's
like Ofsted inspections for teachers. Ofsted inspections for teachers, got you.
And the bureaucracy that they're making us do, you're literally fighting at the end of a shift to remember what piece of bureaucracy. In many cases, you're making one job out of four. For example, the PRN protocol, when you give a drug when necessary, you now have to fill in 4 bits of paper for that. And basically, this wicked Tory government is now taking away the bursary. And over the weekend, as you probably know, lovely Mother Theresa May actually said that the fact that the Red Cross are getting involved in NHS care is not a crisis. This woman is clinically insane.
Hey, steady on, mate. Well, you are a nurse, I suppose.
I know, yeah, but I'm qualified to say what she is as well. And I think this is an organisation...
But no, the Red Cross often takes up a little bit of slack in these scenarios, doesn't it? I mean, they're doing delivery of patients and driving, but otherwise, what do they do? I mean, they'd be standing idle otherwise.
Well, this is an organisation. When my granddad was incarcerated in Germany and Poland in 1942, they helped him out there. I can understand that, but not in the NHS. Come on, Jay, be fair. But all I can say is, sadly, it's going to get worse.
Yeah, of course it is.
Because of Brexit, many of the good, and they are good nurses that I work with in the Polish nurses, Romanian nurses, they're not going to be coming anymore because they don't. Why would they want to come to a country where there's no future?
Hang on, I can answer that. I can answer that with a text that came in just when I was making those comments about trade and NATO. Don't worry, Adam, because according to this text, Brexit won, ha 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 ha.
Well, it's easy said. That's famous last words, you know. And as far as privatisation is concerned, people by going private might think they're going to get something special, but they're not, because every doctor that I know that works in private care also works in the NHS. He's only doing that in his spare time. I mean, I won't mention the name of the hospital, a patient nearly died at a private hospital a couple of years ago. They had to bring in the chief anaesthetist from a major hospital to save the patient. When it's all about privatisation, it's all about making money. And unfortunately, at the moment, healthcare is the privatisation and an unaffordable luxury for the rich, and so is the nursing.
Is that what's going to happen? Because I don't know why. This must be why they get away with it, because if you're not built of entirely selfish DNA, you sort of just presume. I think possibly we all presume everybody else is like us. It's why kind of the new kind of line from the box of trolls is I know you are, but what am I? You sort of point out that someone's a massive bigot or a massive racist, and the response is I know you are, but what am I? So we presume that everybody is somewhere inside going to have a degree of selflessness, a degree of compassion. They can't possibly be planning to hive it all off and flog it, because that would be bad for. But actually, maybe they are. Maybe that's how it does work.
Well, we've all got compassion. We all care for patients.
No, we don't. You do. You do. I hope I do. Sheila Fogarty does. A lot of people do, but there are plenty of people out there riding high on the hog who do not give a sugar about anybody at all except themselves and people identical to them.
Yeah, but basically, Theresa May, I mean, we were talking yesterday in the staff office. She looks creepy.
No, mate, I don't...
And there was something very sinister about this.
Stop
woman.
it.
And I'll back up with what I'm saying.
She does not look anything like a Doctor Who villainess, Adam, and I will fight anyone who says she does.
With the investigatory powers bill, she made one amendment to that, and that is that MP, whereas she wants to spy on the rest of us, she made one amendment to that, and that is that MPs themselves cannot be spied on. I'm sorry, we need to be spying on them. This is a Prime Minister. She sacked 4 top barristers from this Westminster child abuse investigation, and yet we're not allowed to spy on them. Come on, James, there's something very creepy about what's going on. And I
trying to keep politics out of it, weren't we, Adam?
Well, yeah, it's outrageous, and I do care for the nursing profession. I've been qualified many, many years, and I want to see better standards. I'm not against academia, but academia, basically what I'm saying is the bureaucracy should be minimal and the patient care should be maximum. But at the moment, you're scared of becoming the other way around, whereas the bureaucracy...
I hear you.
95%.
No, I hear you, and I did, when police were complaining about having to get degrees, I did point out that if you just called it something else, it might not stick in the craw quite as much as it does for many pros, and I just remind you of that while leaving all your other points to stand. 12:56 is the time. Just to respond to that Brexit one, ha ha ha, or Brexit one, O'Brien, live with it. Of course course I'm living with it, but I think it's important that people realise if you took a democratic vote on an aeroplane to put a drunk in the pilot's seat, right, I would still be screaming my objections until we smashed into the side of the mountain. It's just what normal people do. You take a democratic vote to jump off a cliff and you're watching it happen, it would be very, very odd not to say, let's not jump off the cliff, or let's really think this through, or let's see if we can grow some wings before we jump off. But I'll stick with the pilot one. You take a democratic vote on a plane to put someone who's drunk in the pilot's seat, and then you think everybody who's shouting, that's not a very good idea, should shut up. Well, I'm not going to, sorry. I'm going to carry on screaming right until the plane hits the side of the mountain. Couple of minutes, actually, I've only got a minute left. Siri in Woking. Siri, what did you ring in to say?
Well, I work for Virgin Care, James, and I have worked I'm a health visitor, and over the years I've worked for primary care trusts, I worked for social enterprises, and I have worked for private companies, and the work is the same, James. I am the same health visitor, regardless of who my employer is.
Of course you are, and that's reassuring, but you might have more people to look after if profit is part of the process of deciding what you do with your day, as opposed to when it wasn't part of the process of deciding what you do with your day.
In my experience, workload has been exactly the same since I've been working for Virgin Care, so I just wanted to reassure you a little bit. The staff are the same, they do the same job, the patients really,
and the money that ends up in the pockets of Virgin Care shareholders, where would that have gone when you were working for the NHS?
Well, that is always problematic, and I do have a...
It's not a trick question, but where does it go? That money that now goes to the shareholders, that when you worked for the NHS would not, where does it go now?
The only way to make money from healthcare is to spend less of the pot that you're given.
Well, there you go.
Of course, there will be cuts.
But you are a voice of reassurance, and I am genuinely grateful to you for that. I just think it's important to well, you know, follow the money. 0344. Why am I giving out the phone number? I'm about to bid you farewell. That's it from me for another day. Thank you for all your kind words of concern about my conjunctivitis. I'm being a very brave little soldier. I'm now going to disinfect the microphone before handing you over to Sheila Fogarty.